I think it's an interesting question because I think there's a real kind of impulse to very quickly start to talk about, well, we're running out of resources and climate change and all of that. But actually, when I thought about that question, it gave me pause. And I don't think we do need a circular society. I think one of the problems that that idea embodies is the kind of ideas of quite simple solutions. And I've been around long enough now and seen enough in terms of the different policies, the different sustainability ideas that have come and gone, that have focused quite quickly on these kind of very simple sort of metaphors. So we'll go from a line to a circle. And I think there's something very interesting psychologically here collectively, where we get quite seduced very easily by the idea of, oh, we've been doing it wrong. We just turn the straight line into a circle and we'll be fine. And I feel that there's a danger in feeling the solution is circularity. And that's for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is basically quite sort of simple, resource dynamics, as in sometimes really the recycling and the remanufacturing of certain systems is just not a good idea. You keep them in use for a lot longer and then you put them out of use at the end of its life cycle. Not everything needs to be circular. But beyond that, I also think there's a little bit of a danger, and we've seen it in research, that shows that once we feel that if I'm putting something in a bin, it's going to recycling, then somehow I've now become magically environmentally benign. So there's a story, there's a simple kind of almost like fairy tale story that sometimes it worries me that circular economy is starting to foster, if you like, that actually we've come up with a framework, we've come up with this simple solution that if we think about the Ellen MacArthur, that very famous sort of butterfly diagram, it's symmetrical, it's beautiful. There's something very sort of deeply, I'd almost want to get kind of into Jungian psychoanalytics and think about the kind of collective consciousness of what that might suggest to us as a kind of universal round sort of circle. And I know this isn't kind of the answer that people want. They want a very more straightforward answer, but I don't think that kind of circularity is that helpful, because I think it lulls us into a false sense of security that we've now got the answer. And I don't think circularity is the answer, because in and of itself, the way it's currently framed, it doesn't question some of the fundamental issues that got us here in the first place around why we are over-consuming, why we are overproducing, why there are the vested interests that there are economically that are beyond question and untouchable. Why we actually think economic growth can and should continue. And that's nothing new. People have been saying these things for a long time. I'm just saying the same thing. But it's interesting that we're getting to a point now where you have the circular economy being touted by all kinds of different actors. And so it's actually becoming more pressing socially. I think there are a lot of things, obviously, that are necessary for every sector and every level of society. One of the fundamental things is picking up on debates that have been around for a long time. I'm thinking here about Tim Jackson's work around sustainable prosperity and various people who've argued about displacing gross national product and gross domestic product and economic growth, and rethinking actually what it means to sustain and be resilient. I think those debates are quite challenging. They're scary for a lot of people, and they obviously challenge the status quo significantly. There's a lot of vested interest, and we've seen certainly during COVID that there's been an accrual of profit with certain companies. So the vested interests have just become more and more acute in the last year. But we absolutely cannot shy away from that, because without those sort of fundamental conversations and that political will, my fear is that we'd end up with a system, and the evidence is starting to show that actually, ironically, the notions of circularity are starting to increase consumption and production, because we're seeing primary manufacturing not being displaced by secondary manufacturing, but more resources going on top of it. So what I mean when something is upcycled, for example, it's not actually replacing a primary product, it's something new on top of it. And we are starting to see those trends. And we've seen various actors arguing for making sure you don't cannibalize existing markets. So in its current incarnation, the circular society or the circular economy, I don't think actually offers us the real solutions that we want. And I think one of the transformations that has to happen is within people talking about the circular economy in the discourse. I think we have to invite in and bring in and welcome in people who have a more sort of radical political agenda, for want of a better way of putting it, to start to actually unpick and see what's potentially really, really good and really, really fruitful and productive around notions of sharing and circularity and resilience and prosperity and all the great work that's going on out there, making sure that doesn't get ignored and co-opted by other forms of corporatized circularity that actually are not circularity at all.